an original story narrated exclusively for Love Written in Silence. Lydia Ashcombe sits perfectly still at the dinner table, her hands folded in her lap, her gaze lowered just enough to suggest deference without surrender. The candlelight catches the worn silk of her gown, elegant once, now carefully mended at the seams, while her uncle's voice rises with polished cruelty, declaring her worthless before a room full of titled guests. She does not flinch, does not speak, does not even lift her eyes until Hugh Carradine, Duke of Thornfell, sets down his wine glass with deliberate calm and says the words that will shatter the evening's civility. Then I shall offer my estate before all present. The room falls silent, breath held, as Lydia's gaze finally rises to meet his, not with gratitude, but with a question that will change everything. Outside, the first snow of winter begins to fall. The winter evening settles over Ashcombe Hall with the weight of old stone and older expectations. The house stands against the darkening sky, its windows glowing amber, smoke rising thin and straight from chimneys that have drawn breath for 2 centuries. Inside, the corridors are cold except where fires burn, and even there the warmth does not quite reach the corners. Lydia Ashcombe stands before the mirror in her small chamber, adjusting the sleeve of her gown. The fabric is good, silk, pale gray, trimmed with ivory, but it is not new. She has worn it before, and she will wear it again. Her maid, a girl named Agnes who is too young to hide her pity, hovers near the wardrobe, offering a shawl that Lydia declines with a slight shake of her head. "You'll be cold, miss," Agnes murmurs. "I'll manage," Lydia says, and her voice is steady, neither warm nor cold. It is the voice she has cultivated over the past 3 years, since her father's death left her without fortune, and her uncle became her guardian. It is a voice that does not provoke, does not plead, does not reveal. She fastens a single strand of pearls at her throat, her mother's, the only piece of jewelry she has kept, and smooths the front of her gown. The mirror shows her a woman of 24, neither beautiful nor plain, with dark hair pinned neatly in eyes that have learned not to expect much. She looks, she thinks, like someone who has made peace with being overlooked. But that is not quite true. She has not made peace. She has simply learned to be silent. Downstairs, the hall is already filling with guests. Lydia hears the murmur of voices, the rustle of silk and wool, the occasional bright note of laughter. Her uncle, Mr. Percival Ashcombe, is a man who understands the value of appearances. He hosts well, speaks graciously, and manages his niece's small inheritance with what he calls prudence, and what she suspects is something else entirely. She descends the staircase slowly, one hand light on the banister. The hall below is lit with candles in silver sconces, and the air smells of beeswax and roasted meat. Guests stand in clusters, their faces turned toward one another, their voices low and civil. No one looks up as she reaches the bottom step, except one. Hugh Carradine, Duke of Thornfell, stands near the fireplace, a glass of wine in his hand, his posture relaxed but his attention sharp. He is a man in his early 30s, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair and a face that might be called handsome if it were not so serious. He does not smile often, Lydia has observed, but when he does, it is genuine. He is watching her now, and she feels the weight of his gaze, even before she meets it. She inclines her head slightly, a gesture of acknowledgement, nothing more, and he returns it with equal restraint. They have spoken only once before, 2 weeks ago, when he visited Ashcombe Hall on business with her uncle. She had been in the library, reviewing the household accounts, and he had entered without knocking. She had not startled, only looked up, and he had apologized with a courtesy that seemed almost old-fashioned. Then, unexpectedly, he had asked her opinion on a matter of land management, something about tenant rents and crop rotation, and she had answered honestly, without softening her words. He had listened without interrupting, and when she finished, he had nodded once and said, "You're right." It was a small thing, but she had not forgotten it. Now, as she crosses the hall toward the drawing room where the other ladies are gathered, she feels his gaze follow her, and she wonders what he sees. The dinner is announced, and the guests begin to move toward the dining room. Lydia takes her place at the far end of the table, near the younger daughters of minor gentry and a widow whose conversation consists entirely of complaints about her health. She does not mind. She has learned to occupy the margins. Her uncle sits at the head of the table, presiding with easy authority. He is a man of middling height and considerable self-regard, with graying hair and a smile that never quite reaches his eyes. Beside him sits Lady Hargrove, a woman of influence whose approval he courts with transparent eagerness. The Duke of Thornfell is seated midway down the table, across from a baronet's daughter, who is young and pretty, and determined to capture his attention. She succeeds only intermittently. His responses are polite but brief, and more than once Lydia notices. His gaze drifts toward the far end of the table. The first courses are served. Conversation flows in practiced currents. Talk of the weather, the roads, the season in London. Lydia eats sparingly and speaks only when addressed, which is seldom. She has perfected the art of being present without being noticed. Then, as the roast is brought in and the wine is poured, the conversation shifts. Lady Hargrove, her voice carrying easily down the table, turns to Lydia's uncle with a smile that is both warm and calculating. "Mr. Ashcombe, I have been meaning to ask, have you given thought to your niece's prospects? She is of an age, surely, to be considering marriage." The table quiets slightly. Lydia feels the attention shift toward her. Though no one looks directly, she keeps her gaze on her plate, her hands steady. Her uncle chuckles, a sound meant to convey affectionate exasperation. "Ah, my dear niece, a dutiful girl, to be sure, but I'm afraid her situation is, shall we say, complicated." "Complicated?" Lady Hargrove prompts, her curiosity sharpened. Her father, God rest him, was a generous man. Too generous, perhaps. He left little in the way of fortune. Her uncle's tone is regretful, but there is something beneath it, something that makes Lydia's jaw tighten. "I do what I can, of course, but one must be realistic. Without a dowry, her options are limited." The words hang in the air, polite and poisonous. Lady Hargrove makes a sympathetic noise. A pity. She seems a sensible girl. Sensible, yes, her uncle agrees. He lifts his wine glass, and his smile is thin. But sensibility, I fear, is not currency in the marriage market. Someone laughs softly. Lydia does not look up. Her hands remain folded in her lap, her breathing even. She has heard worse. She has endured worse. This is only another small wound, cleanly delivered. But then her uncle speaks again, and this time his voice carries the finality of a pronouncement. "Not worth a dowry." The silence that follows is not shocked. It is simply disciplined. No one gasps. No one protests. They only absorb the statement, file it away, and prepare to move on. Lydia feels the heat rise in her cheeks, but she does not move. She will not give them the satisfaction. She will sit here, silent and composed, until the moment passes, and then she will excuse herself and retreat to her chamber, and tomorrow she will wake and do it all again. But then, from the middle of the table, a voice speaks. "Then I shall offer my estate before all present." The voice is calm, measured, and absolutely certain. It belongs to the Duke of Thornfell. Every head turns. The silence deepens, becomes something else, something charged and dangerous. Lydia's gaze lifts slowly and finds his. Hugh Carradine is not looking at her uncle. He is looking at her. His expression is serious, almost grave, but there is no pity in it. Only decision. "Your Grace," her uncle says, and his voice is tight. "I'm sure you jest." "I do not jest." The Duke sets down his glass with deliberate care. "I offer my estate, my name, and my protection to Miss Ashcombe, if she will accept them." The room seems to tilt. Lydia feels the weight of every gaze, the pressure of expectation, and shock and calculation. Her uncle's face has gone pale, then red. Lady Hargrove's mouth is slightly open. The baronet's daughter looks as though she might weep. And Lydia does not know what she feels. Gratitude? Anger? Confusion? She meets the Duke's gaze, and in it she sees something she did not expect. Respect. Not rescue. Not possession. Respect. Her voice, when she finds it, is steady. "You honor me, Your Grace." It is not acceptance. It is not refusal. It is only acknowledgement. He inclines his head. "The honor is mine." Her uncle recovers quickly, his smile returning, though it is brittle now. "Your Grace is most generous indeed. We shall, of course, discuss the particulars at a more appropriate time." "There is nothing to discuss," the Duke says quietly. "I have made my offer. Miss Ashcombe may accept or decline as she chooses." And with that, he turns his attention back to his plate, as though the matter is settled. The dinner continues, but the atmosphere has changed. Conversations resume, but they are strained, fractured. Lydia eats nothing. She sits in silence, her hands folded, her mind racing. When the ladies withdraw to the drawing room, she moves with them, but she does not join their conversations. She stands near the window, looking out at the darkening grounds, and she tries to understand what has just happened. The Duke of Thornfell has offered her his estate, in front of witnesses, in front of her uncle. It is not a proposal of marriage, not exactly. It is something else, a declaration, a challenge, and she does not know what to do with it. The following morning arrives cold and bright. Frost covers the grounds of Ashcombe Hall, and the sky is a pale, unforgiving blue. Lydia wakes early, as she always does, and dresses without assistance. Agnes knocks softly and enters with tea, her eyes wide with barely suppressed curiosity. "Is it true, miss?" she whispers. "What they're saying? What are they saying?" Lydia asks, though she already knows, that the Duke of Thornfell has offered for you. Lydia takes the tea and sips it slowly. "He made a statement, nothing more." "But miss, that will be all, Agnes." The girl curtsies and withdraws, disappointed. Lydia finishes her tea and goes downstairs. The house is quiet. Most of the guests departed late last night, and those who remain are still abed. She moves through the corridors with practiced silence, avoiding the main rooms, and slips into the library. It is her favorite room in the house, small, lined with books that no one reads, warmed by a fire that the housekeeper keeps lit out of habit. She closes the door behind her and stands for a moment, breathing. Then she hears footsteps in the corridor. The door opens, and her uncle enters. He does not knock. "Lydia," he says, and his voice is pleasant, almost warm. "I hoped I might find you here." She turns to face him, her expression neutral. "Uncle." He closes the door and moves toward the fire, his hands clasped behind his back. "Last night was unexpected. Yes, the Duke's offer was generous, extraordinarily so." He pauses, watching her. "Though I confess, I am not entirely certain of his motives." Lydia says nothing. Her uncle continues, his tone thoughtful. "A man of his station does not make such gestures lightly. One wonders what he hopes to gain." "Perhaps he gains nothing," Lydia says quietly. "Perhaps he simply acted on principle." Her uncle's smile is thin. "Principle? Yes, a noble notion." He moves closer, his gaze sharp. "But you must understand, my dear, that such gestures carry consequences. The Duke may have spoken in the heat of the moment, but the world will remember. And the world, I'm afraid, is not always kind to young women who accept too much." The words are carefully chosen, and Lydia hears the warning beneath them. She is being told politely to decline. "I have not accepted anything," she says. "Good, that is wise." Her uncle's smile softens. "You are a sensible girl, Lydia. I have always said so. And sensible girls know that pride is a luxury they cannot afford." He leaves without waiting for a response. Lydia stands alone in the library, her hands clenched at her sides. She wants to scream, to throw something, to shatter the careful composure she has maintained for so long. But she does not. She only stands and breathes, and waits for the anger to pass. It does not pass. 3 days later, a letter arrives. It is addressed to Lydia, written in a clear, firm hand, and sealed with the Duke of Thornfell's crest. She opens it in her chamber, alone. The letter is brief. "Miss Ashcombe, I write to extend an invitation to Thornfell. I believe it would be beneficial for us to speak privately, without the interference of others. If you are willing, I shall send a carriage on the morning of the 10th. I do not ask for your acceptance of my offer, only for your time and your honesty. Yours in respect, Hugh Carradine." Duke of Thornfell. Lydia reads the letter twice, then folds it carefully and places it in the drawer of her writing desk. She does not sleep well that night. The next morning, she writes a reply. It is even briefer than his. "Your Grace, I accept your invitation." L. Ashcombe. She seals it and gives it to Agnes to post. On the morning of the 10th, the carriage arrives. Thornfell is an hour's journey from Ashcombe Hall, and Lydia spends the time looking out the window at the passing countryside. The land here is wilder, less cultivated, with low stone walls and bare trees, and fields that stretch toward distant hills. The sky is overcast, the light flat and cold. The carriage turns onto a long drive, and Thornfell comes into view. It is not what she expected. She had imagined something grand and imposing, but Thornfell is austere, a house of gray stone and narrow windows. built for endurance rather than display. It stands against the hillside like a fortress, and there is something almost defiant in its plainness. The carriage stops before the main entrance. A footman opens the door and offers his hand, and Lydia steps down onto the gravel drive. The Duke is waiting at the top of the steps. He is dressed simply, dark coat, no ornamentation, and he descends to meet her with a courtesy that feels neither rehearsed nor excessive. "Miss Ashcombe," he says, and his voice is steady. "Thank you for coming." "Your Grace," she replies, and curtsies. He gestures toward the house. "Will you come inside? It's cold." She follows him through the entrance hall, stone floors, high ceilings, little decoration, and into a smaller room that overlooks the grounds. A fire burns in the hearth, and the room is warm, almost intimate. He gestures to a chair near the fire. "Please." She sits, and he takes the chair opposite. For a moment, neither speaks. Then Lydia says, "Why did you do it?" He does not pretend to misunderstand. "Because silence would have made me complicit." "In what?" "In your humiliation." The word is blunt, and it lands like a stone. Lydia looks away, toward the fire. "You did not know me," she says quietly. "You owed me nothing." "I owed you the truth," he says, "that you are worth more than your uncle's cruelty." She turns back to him, her gaze sharp. "And now, do you expect gratitude?" "Obedience." No, his voice is firm. "I expect honesty. I acted because I could not do otherwise. But I will not bind you to a choice you did not make freely." Lydia studies him, searching for deception, for the hidden motive her uncle warned her about. She finds none. "Then what do you want?" she asks. He leans forward slightly, his hands resting on his knees. "I want to know if you believe me." It is such a simple question, and yet it unmoors her. She has spent so long guarding herself, expecting manipulation, that she does not know how to respond to sincerity. "I don't know," she says finally. He nods, as though he expected this. "Then stay. Not as my guest, not as someone who owes me anything. Stay as yourself. Speak freely. And when you are certain, you can decide." Lydia looks at him, at the firelight reflected in his eyes, and she feels something shift inside her. Not trust, not yet, but possibility. "I will stay," she says. He smiles then, just slightly. "Good." The days at Thornfell pass with a quiet strangeness. Lydia is given a room in the east wing, spacious, simply furnished, with windows that overlook the gardens. She is not treated as a guest, nor as a dependent. She is simply there, and no one questions it. The household is small and well-run. The housekeeper, Mrs. Penrose, is a woman of middle years with a face that suggests both warmth and discretion. She greets Lydia with a nod and shows her the house without excessive commentary. "If you need anything, miss, you need only ask," Mrs. Penrose says. "Thank you," Lydia replies, and means it. She spends the first day exploring. Thornfell is larger than it appears from the outside, with long corridors and rooms that seem to have been closed for years. There is a library, smaller than Ashcombe's but better stocked, and a music room with a pianoforte that looks well used. She runs her fingers over the keys, but does not play. On the second day, she encounters the Duke in the entrance hall. He is dressed for riding, and he pauses when he sees her. "Miss Ashcombe, I hope you are comfortable." "I am, thank you." He hesitates, then says, "I am riding out to visit some of the tenants. If you would care to accompany me, you are welcome." She considers, then nods. "I would." They ride in silence for the first part of the journey, the horses moving at an easy pace along the muddy lanes. The countryside is bleak but beautiful, the fields brown, and the hedgerows bare. Lydia breathes deeply, feeling the cold air in her lungs, and realizes she has not ridden in months. The Duke glances at her. "You ride well. My father taught me. He was a good man, I think." Lydia looks at him sharply. "You knew him?" "No, but I have heard of him. He was respected." She does not know what to say to that, so she says nothing. They reach the first cottage, and the Duke dismounts and helps her down. An elderly man emerges, leaning on a stick, his face weathered and cautious. But when he sees the Duke, his expression softens. "Your Grace, Mr. Brennan, how is your wife?" "Better, sir, the medicine helped." They speak for a few minutes, and Lydia watches, noting the way the Duke listens, the way he does not rush or condescend. When they leave, Mr. Brennan nods to her as well, and she returns the gesture. They visit 2 more cottages, and each time, the Duke is met with respect that seems earned rather than demanded. Lydia finds herself reassessing him, piece by piece. On the ride back, she says, "You care about them." "I do." "Why?" He looks at her surprised. "Because they are mine to care for." That is not a common view. Perhaps it should be. They ride in silence for a while. And then Lydia says, "My father believed the same. He gave away more than he could afford. My uncle called it foolishness." "Your uncle is wrong." The certainty in his voice is startling. Lydia looks at him, and for the first time, she feels something close to kinship. "Thank you," she says quietly. He inclines his head. "You are welcome." That evening, they dine together in the smaller dining room. The meal is simple but well prepared, and the conversation is easier than Lydia expected. They speak of books, of land management, of the difficulties of balancing tradition and progress. At one point, the Duke says, "You have a sharp mind, Miss Ashcombe. It is a pity it has been so little used." She smiles faintly. Women's minds are not often valued. Then the world is poorer for it. She looks at him, and for a moment, neither speaks. Then she says, "Why did you never marry?" He sets down his glass. "I was engaged once. She died of fever 3 weeks before the wedding." Lydia's breath catches. "I'm sorry. It was a long time ago." He pauses. "But it made me wary. I did not want to choose again out of duty or expectation. I wanted something real." "And you think this is real?" He meets her gaze. "I think it could be." The fire crackles. Outside, the wind rises. Lydia does not look away. "I think so too." The next morning, Lydia is in the library when Mrs. Penrose enters, carrying a tray with tea. "I thought you might like something warm, miss." "Thank you, Mrs. Penrose." The housekeeper sets down the tray, then hesitates. "If I may, miss, I knew your father." Lydia looks up sharply. "You did?" "Yes, many years ago when I was in service at my previous post. He was a guest there, and he was kind to me when others were not." She pauses. "He was a good man, an honorable man." Lydia's throat tightens. "He was." Mrs. Penrose nods. "I thought you should know. There are those who remember." She leaves quietly, and Lydia sits alone, the tea cooling in her hands. She thinks of her father, of his generosity, his gentleness, his refusal to be anything other than what he believed was right. She thinks of the debts he left, the questions her uncle never answered, the way his name has been quietly tarnished. And she thinks of the Duke, who offered his estate not because he wanted to possess her, but because he could not bear to see her diminished. She sets down the tea and stands. There is something she needs to find. She spends the afternoon searching the library, pulling down ledgers and old correspondence. She does not know what she is looking for, only that there is something, some piece of the puzzle, that will make sense of her father's choices. And then, tucked into the back of an old account book, she finds it. A letter, addressed to the late Duke of Thornfell, written in her father's hand. She unfolds it carefully and reads, "My dear friend, I write to assure you that the matter we discussed is resolved. The debt is forgiven, and I ask only that you do not speak of it. Your son will inherit an unblemished name, and that is worth more than any sum. I do this freely and without regret. Honor, I believe, is not measured in coin. Yours in friendship, Thomas Ashcombe." Lydia reads the letter again, and then a third time. Her hands are shaking. Her father had covered a debt for the Thornfell estate, for the Duke's family, and he had asked for silence. She folds the letter and presses it to her chest, and for the first time in 3 years, she weeps. That evening, she finds the Duke in the study. He looks up when she enters, and his expression shifts immediately. "Miss Ashcombe, what's wrong?" She holds out the letter without speaking. He takes it, reads it, and goes very still. "I did not know," he says finally, his voice low. "My father never told me." "He kept his promise," Lydia says. "He said nothing." The Duke sets down the letter and looks at her, and she sees the same realization in his eyes that she felt when she read the words. "Your father saved my family's name," he says, "and your uncle has spent 3 years destroying his." Lydia nods. "Yes." The Duke stands and moves toward her, and for a moment she thinks he will take her hand, but he does not. He only stands close, his presence steady and solid. "This changes nothing about my offer," he says, "but it changes everything about what I owe you." "You owe me nothing," Lydia says. "I owe you the truth," he says, "and I owe your father's memory the same." She looks up at him, and she sees not pity, not guilt, but something fiercer, determination. "What will you do?" she asks. "I will stand beside you. he says, "and I will make certain the world knows what your father was." She believes him. The following week, an invitation arrives. A tea assembly in the county, hosted by Lady Hargrove. It is a small, elegant affair, the kind of gathering where reputations are made and unmade with a single word. The Duke receives an invitation. So does Lydia. He comes to her chamber door and knocks softly. When she opens it, he holds up the invitation. "Will you go?" he asks. She looks at the card, at the elegant script, and she feels the old instinct rise, to decline, to hide, to avoid the whispers. But she thinks of her father, of his honor, of the letter. "Yes," she says, "I will go." The Duke smiles. "Good." The assembly is held in a grand house on the edge of the county, its rooms filled with light and the scent of hothouse flowers. Lydia arrives with the Duke, and the moment they enter, the whispers begin. She hears them, soft, insidious, wrapped in polite smiles. Opportunist, fortune hunter, woman who has accepted too much. She keeps her head high and her expression calm, but inside, she feels the weight of every gaze, every judgment. Lady Hargrove greets them with a smile that does not reach her eyes. "Your Grace, Miss Ashcombe, how delightful." "Lady Hargrove," the Duke says, his tone courteous but cool. They move through the room, and Lydia feels the space around her widen. Women turn away. Men avoid her gaze. She is being excluded, quietly and absolutely. And then, across the room, she sees her uncle. He is speaking with a group of gentlemen, his manner easy and confident. When he sees her, his smile sharpens. He approaches, and the Duke stiffens beside her. "Lydia," her uncle says warmly, "what a surprise. I did not expect to see you here." "I was invited," she says quietly. Of course, of course." He turns to the Duke. "Your Grace, I trust you are well." "I am." Her uncle's gaze shifts back to Lydia, and there is something calculating in it. "I have been speaking with some friends about your father, my dear. Such a generous man. Too generous, perhaps. There are those who wonder if his, shall we say, financial difficulties were entirely the result of bad luck. The implication is clear. He is suggesting scandal, mismanagement, dishonor." Lydia feels the blood drain from her face. The room seems to tilt. And then, before the Duke can speak, she does. "My father," she says, and her voice is steady, clear, carrying across the room, "was a man of honor. He gave freely to protect others. He chose principle over wealth, and he did so without regret." The room goes silent. Her uncle's smile falters. "My dear, I did not mean. You meant exactly what you said." Lydia interrupts. "But you are wrong. My father's generosity was not foolishness. It was courage. And I will not allow his name to be tarnished by those who do not understand the difference." She does not raise her voice. She does not need to. The words are enough. Her uncle's face goes pale, then red. He opens his mouth, then closes it again. The Duke steps forward, not in front of her, but beside her. "Miss Ashcombe speaks the truth. Her father was a man of principle, and I am honored to stand with his daughter." The silence holds for a moment longer. Then, slowly, one of the gentlemen nods, then another. Lady Hargrove's smile is brittle, but she inclines her head. How admirable. The moment passes. Conversation resumes. But something has shifted. Lydia's uncle turns and walks away without another word. They leave the assembly soon after. The carriage ride back to Thornfell is quiet, the countryside dark and still. Lydia sits with her hands folded in her lap, her heart still racing. She spoke. She contradicted. She claimed her father's honor in front of witnesses. And the world did not end. The Duke is watching her, and when she meets his gaze, he smiles. "You were magnificent," he says. She shakes her head. "I was terrified." "That does not make you less magnificent." She looks away, out the window, and feels something loosen in her chest. Not relief, exactly, but something close to it. "Thank you," she says quietly. "For what?" "For not speaking for me." He is silent for a moment. Then he says, "You did not need me to." She looks at him, and she sees in his eyes the same recognition she felt when she first read her father's letter. Not rescue, not possession, partnership. "No," she says, "I did not." They ride the rest of the way in companionable silence, and when they reach Thornfell, the Duke helps her down from the carriage and walks her to the door. Before she goes inside, she turns to him. "I think I am beginning to believe you." He smiles. "Good." She goes inside, and he watches until the door closes behind her. The next few days bring consequences. Invitations that were expected do not arrive. Letters that were promised are not written. The exclusion is polite, but it is absolute. Lydia feels it, but she does not falter. She spends her days at Thornfell, reading, walking the grounds, speaking with Mrs. Penrose and the tenants. She is finding her voice slowly, and it is stronger than she expected. But then, one afternoon, a letter arrives. It is from a distant cousin, a woman Lydia barely knows, and the words are kind but firm. My dear Lydia, I write out of concern for your welfare. It has come to my attention that your association with the Duke of Thornfell has caused difficulties. I urge you to consider withdrawing for your own sake and for his. A woman in your position cannot afford to be the subject of gossip. I remain your affectionate cousin. Margaret. Lydia reads the letter twice, then sets it down. She sits for a long time, staring at the fire. That evening, she finds the Duke in the study. He looks up when she enters, and his expression shifts immediately. Miss Ashcombe, what is it? She hands him the letter without speaking. He reads it, and his jaw tightens. This is true, she says quietly. I am costing you your reputation. I do not care. You should. She moves closer, her hands clenched. I will not be the weapon used against you. I will not be the reason you are diminished. He stands and faces her, his gaze fierce. And I will not be the shelter that makes you silent again. They stare at each other, and the air between them is charged, electric. I am not silent, she says, and her voice shakes. I am trying to protect you. I do not need protection, he says. I need you to stay. Why? Because I love you. The words fall between them like stones into water, and for a moment, Lydia cannot breathe. You, what? He does not look away. I love you, not because you need me, not because I want to save you, but because you are brave and honest and worth more than any title or estate. She shakes her head, tears burning in her eyes. You cannot. I can, he says, and I do. She turns away, pressing her hands to her face, and she feels the weight of everything. Her father's death, her uncle's cruelty, the years of silence, pressing down on her. And then she feels the Duke's hands on her shoulders, gentle and steady. You do not have to decide now, he says quietly. But do not leave because you think you are protecting me. Leave only if you do not want to stay. She turns to face him, and she sees in his eyes the same certainty she felt when she spoke at the assembly. I want to stay, she whispers. He pulls her into his arms, and she lets herself be held, and for the first time in years, she feels safe. The days pass, and the exclusion continues. But Lydia no longer cares. She has found something more valuable than approval. She has found herself. One afternoon, she is in the library when Mrs. Penrose enters, carrying a small wooden box. Miss Ashcombe, I found this among the late Duke's papers. I thought you should have it. Lydia takes the box and opens it. Inside is another letter, written in her father's hand, addressed to her. She unfolds it with trembling fingers. My dearest Lydia, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and I hope you will forgive me for the difficulties I have left you. I know the world will judge my choices harshly, but I hope you will understand. I chose honor over fortune because I still believe, that a good name is worth more than gold. I hope you will carry that belief with you, and that you will never be ashamed of who you are. You are worth more than any dowry, my dear. Never forget that. Your loving father, Thomas Ashcombe. Lydia reads the letter through tears, and when she finishes, she folds it carefully and holds it to her chest. She knows what she must do. A week later, an invitation arrives. The annual Thornfell Assembly, a tradition that brings together tenants, gentry, and neighbors for an evening of celebration. It is the Duke's most public event, and this year it will be held on the estate's grand staircase, lit with lanterns under the open sky. Lydia receives her invitation, and she accepts without hesitation. The Duke comes to her chamber the evening before the assembly. He knocks softly, and when she opens the door, he is holding a velvet box. I thought you might wear these, he says, opening it to reveal a strand of diamonds. She looks at the jewels, then at him, and she shakes her head gently. Thank you, she says, but I will wear my mother's pearls. He smiles. Of course, she closes the door, and she prepares herself, not for battle, for truth. The evening of the assembly arrives cold and clear. Snow begins to fall as the guests arrive, light and soft, covering the grounds in white. Lanterns are lit along the drive, and on the staircase, casting warm light against the stone. Lydia stands at the top of the stairs, wearing her gray silk gown and her mother's pearls. She is not hiding. She is not waiting. She is ready. The guests gather on the staircase and the courtyard below. The Duke stands beside her, his presence steady and sure. He does not speak. He simply waits. And then, through the crowd, Lydia sees her uncle. He is smiling, confident, surrounded by allies. He moves toward the front, and when he sees her, his smile sharpens. He raises his voice, addressing the crowd. "Your Grace, ladies and gentlemen, I feel I must speak, out of concern for all present. My niece is a dear girl, but she has been misled. Her father, God rest him, left her with little, and she has, I fear, accepted generosity that she cannot repay." The crowd murmurs. Lydia feels the weight of their judgment, but she does not flinch. Her uncle continues, his tone regretful. "It is a difficult situation. I only hope that is enough." Lydia's voice cuts through the cold air, clear and unwavering. The crowd falls silent. She descends one step, then another, until she stands level with her uncle. "You have spoken enough falsehoods," she says, "and I will not allow you to speak another." Her uncle's face goes pale. "Lydia, my father," she says, and her voice carries across the courtyard, "was a man of honor. He gave freely to protect others. He covered a debt that would have destroyed the Thornfell name, and he asked for nothing in return. He chose principle over wealth, and he did so without regret." The crowd stirs. Murmurs rise. Her uncle opens his mouth, but before he can speak, another voice cuts through the night. She speaks the truth. An elderly man steps forward from the crowd. Mr. Brennan, the tenant Lydia met on her first ride with the Duke. He moves slowly, leaning on his stick, but his voice is strong. "I was there," he says. "I served both estates. I saw the ledgers. Mr. Ashcombe forgave the debt. He saved the Thornfell name." The crowd shifts. Faces turn toward her uncle, and the judgment in their eyes is no longer directed at Lydia. The Duke steps forward, not in front of her, but beside her. He addresses the crowd, his voice calm and certain. "Miss Ashcombe speaks the truth. Her father was a man of honor, and I am proud to stand with his daughter." He pauses, then turns to Lydia. "I offer my estate not as charity, but as pledge to a woman of worth. I have chosen freely." The snow falls heavier now, soft and silent. The crowd is still, and then slowly, one person begins to clap. Then another. Then another. Lydia's uncle turns and walks away, his shoulders stiff, his allies silent. The Duke takes Lydia's hand, and she lets him. She looks out at the crowd, at the faces that once judged her, and she sees something new in their eyes. Respect. The assembly continues, but Lydia and the Duke slip away, retreating to the warmth of the house. The fires burn low, and the corridors are quiet. They stand together in the entrance hall, and for a moment, neither speaks. Then Lydia says, "Thank you for standing beside me." "Thank you," he says, "for letting me." She looks up at him, and she sees in his eyes the same certainty she felt on the staircase. "I love you," she says quietly. He smiles, and it is the warmest smile she has ever seen. "I love you." He takes her face in his hands and kisses her, and it is not triumphant or desperate. It is tender, serious, full of promise. When they part, he rests his forehead against hers, and they stand together in the warm light. Outside, the snow continues to fall, covering the grounds in silence. Spring comes to Thornfell with the slow, inevitable turning of the season. The snow melts, the fields green, and the gardens bloom with early flowers. Lydia walks through them often, her hands bare, her face turned toward the sun. The social world has adjusted, though some whispers remain. She is no longer invited to every gathering, but she no longer cares. She has found something more valuable than approval. She has found herself. She wears her mother's pearls, not the Duke's gifts. She manages the estate's charitable works with Mrs. Penrose, and she is respected, sometimes grudgingly, but respected nonetheless. Hugh and Lydia are seen together often, walking the grounds, speaking with tenants, planning for the future. They are companions, partners, lovers. One afternoon, Lydia is in the library, reading her father's letter once more. She traces the words with her finger, then folds it carefully and places it in the drawer. Hugh enters, and she looks up. "What are you reading?" he asks. "A memory," she says. He crosses the room and sits beside her, and they speak of small things, the day's work, the tenants, the garden. He rests his forehead against hers, and she closes her eyes, breathing in the scent of him. the warmth of him. "Are you happy?" he asks quietly. She opens her eyes and looks at him, and she sees in his gaze the same question she asked herself so many times. "Yes," she says, "I am." He smiles, and they sit together in the warm light, equal in stride, equal in worth. Outside, the gardens bloom, and the world turns, and the love between them is not a rescue. It is a recognition.